Hello students, very good afternoon. Am I audible? Yeah. So actually there is no technical polls here. So I would like you to give me an affirmation if you can hear me well and if the screen is visible for you in your chat box. Am I audible? Okay, fine. So if in case we have any technical issues, students, you can just let me know. Okay. Or you can use your hand gestures or any of these possible ways to communicate. But let me know. Yeah, sorry. Just let me know if everything is fine. So it's very exciting today. Why? Because today we are going to start human physiology, and it's always good to know about our body, and it's very easy to understand too, right? So before we start this topic, I would like to know your subject knowledge with respect to this. Okay. So first question I have for you is the structure which prevents the entry of food into your windpipe is. So you have your four options, that is gullet, glottis, tonsil, and epiglottis. So you have a minute to answer this question, and I want you to put your answers in the chat box. So which is a structure that prevents the entry of food into your windpipe? It's supposed to be a very easy question. So try answering. It's fine if you're wrong, don't mind, because you're starting to learn. It's okay. So please type your answers in the chat box. A, B, C, D. Okay. Any of these? All right. So what do I do? So let's get going. So if anybody answers, let me see. See, there was this particular case back then. So I had taken my father to a hospital. So this is what happened then. We were in the emergency ward, and during this time, a woman came with a 10-year-old boy to this emergency ward. The boy had fallen down in a pit and he had gone unconscious. So now what did the mother do? The mother actually fed water to the baby, to the boy, so that, thinking that he might have dehydrated and he would have fallen. But unfortunately, all the water entered into his lungs and it choked him and he passed away. So doctor was telling, you cannot feed anybody water when they're unconscious. Okay. So the reason is whenever we are breathing, okay, whenever we are breathing or whenever you're swallowing, so especially whenever you're swallowing, observe this, your breath stops whenever you swallow. Even in the saliva that you're trying to swallow, usually your breathing stops, correct? So what happens here? So our body is designed so beautifully that we have a common passage until we have our pharynx. So that is a common passage we have here. So here what happens, both wind and food, they share the common passage and then they bifurcate into respective pipes, that is windpipe and food pipe. So here the bifurcation is actually controlled by one of the cartilaginous structures called as epiglottis. Okay, epiglottis is a structure which is a cartilaginous flap-like structure, so which usually covers over the glottis. Glottis is an entrance for the windpipe, I can tell. Okay, So when it covers it, basically what happens, the food can easily flow to your food pipe rather than entering into the windpipe. Okay. So let us see what is the next question we have. The next question we have is the nose produces dash to put the moisture in the air and catch the dust and okay bacteria. So you have your four options. One is mucus, next one is bronchi, next one is cilia and oxygen. So tell me people, what is your option? What do you think is the right option? So students from YouTube, yes, correct. Sanjay Singh, thank you for responding. Okay, so you please respond in your chat box. Give me 1 second. The people who are on Zoom actually. The stream ended for some reason, so I'll have to redo the things again. Just give me a second, people. Okay. Yeah. Okay, it's been live streamed. I'm sorry, the students who are in YouTube, basically I would not be able to see you, but I will follow your things after the stream. Okay, so let's go for the chapter itself. Okay, so when we talk about breathing and respiration, which are different processes, but both are interlinked with each other to perform one specific function. So here what happens is whenever we see organisms, living organisms have developed a methodology to make use of the nutrients that are available. So for every function that we do with respect to biology, that is your growth, the reproduction, okay, and cell division, repair, okay, any of these functions you take, so we require energy for that. And one of the major things that happens with the production of energy to our tissues is the availability of certain elements like oxygen. Okay, so if you see most of the organisms which are aerobic, we have to provide oxygen to our tissues so that our tissues use this oxygen for breakdown of the energy, okay, so that they can function. So that is why these two important things are very required. What is those? First one, we have to take in the atmospheric air, fix the required gas into the system. For example, for us, oxygen is required, right? So this oxygen has to get fixed into our bloodstream, and through our bloodstream, it gets to our tissues. And there, what happens? The tissues use this oxygen for breakdown of our, energy compounds, and then the byproduct of this catabolism would be your carbon dioxide. So this is what, like, fixing the oxygen into your system and removal of carbon dioxide would complete one cycle, okay, one cycle of your breathing, I can tell, or respiration. So all the organisms respire, and it is very must for all the organisms to respire. Why it is very must? As I said, there is a systematic reduction of these energy molecules, like we have studied in plants, it is sucrose, in animals like us, it is glucose. So we reduce this to produce energy, isn't it? So that is why from your bacteria all the way till your complex eukaryotes like us human beings, we have a mechanism, we have different mechanisms, okay, to make sure that this particular gases are exchanged. Okay, fine. So let us take some of the examples and look around us to analyze what are the different ways in which organisms have evolved to do this process of exchange of gases. Let us take very lower organisms like sponges, coelenterata, and flatworms. So these are extremely lower organisms when it comes to animal kingdom. Now we have learned that the exchange of gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide happens through simple diffusion, and that happens through entire body surface, right? So in sponges, we have studied that they have specialized canal systems. So these canal systems, the water goes through these canals like ostia and ossiculum. During this entry and exit process, the gases gets exchanged. So that is what happens in very, very lower invertebrates. So let us take some more examples for the higher invertebrates like earthworms. Okay, so they have cutaneous respiration. That means these earthworms or some of the worm-like insects, they have a network of tubules. Okay, that come to the almost to the surface of the skin, okay, a surface of their outermost layer. And here these tubules are called as tracheal tubules. So basically what happens is the trachea fixes the atmospheric air into the tissues, and openly what happens is the blood, when it comes in contact with these tubules, okay, because of the pressure difference in the air, now what happens, the exchange of gases will take place. And next one, let us take examples of fishes and some of the aquatic arthropods. Okay, so for example, prawn is an aquatic arthropod, and you can also take some of the mollusks. Okay, soft-bodied organisms like octopus, or you can take examples of squids. Okay, squids. Vascularized structures called as gills. Okay, book gills, book lungs. Okay, so these are some of the gill-like structures where the exchange of gases would take place. And next one, when you talk about vascularization, so vascularized bags like lungs are found in terrestrial forms, basically. So this is very, very high level or advanced organisms. So the level of organization is in these organisms is very complex compared to that of the lower organisms, right? So if you take in higher vertebrates such as fishes, they use gills, right? When you take reptiles, birds, and mammals, we respire through lungs. And amphibians were like the first ancestors of terrestrial life. So they respire through both pulmonary respiration as well as cutaneous respiration. Cutaneous is through the surface of their body, right? So you can see the level of organization that has occurred throughout our evolutionary timeline to develop these specialized structures, right? So if you, in detail, if you keep on observing from lower organisms to higher organisms, what we can conclude is the organisms have been trying to develop as efficient systems as possible to fix, as much air as possible with very limited amount of energy, applied to it. Correct? No. So fine. Let us come to human respiratory system, because that is why we are studying human physiology, right? So when it comes to human physiology, especially when it comes to our respiratory system, so respiratory system basically starts with our external nostrils. So our nose opens up as two openings called as nostrils. So the nostrils are just above our lips, right? So the nostrils open up into our nasal passage, and through our nasal passage, okay, so if you look at our nasal passage is lined up by nasal cilia, and the nasal cilia that is present is actually very important to purify the air that we are breathing. So most of the air that we inhale is contaminated by a lot of invisible particles like suspended particulate matter, that we call it as SPM. Okay, suspended particulate matter, and something like dust, pollen, okay, and other debris, other solid debris usually enter into our respiratory tract. So these nasal cilia, they prevent like a brush, and they make the air clean. So once we pass through the nasal passage, okay, so you might have heard, you might have studied in your digestive system that our upper part, that is the the upper palate, we have two palates, isn't it? We have the upper palate and the lower palate of our mouth, correct? So when you talk about upper palate, so we have rough palate and the soft palate, correct? So in the rough palate, when we talk about the very anterior portion of your mouth, just behind your teeth, which feels very hard when we touch it, so that is actually the floor of the nasal cavity, correct? So if you just put your finger in your nose and feel the surface, like the lower surface of your nose, you feel that it is quite hard, right? The same roof, that is the floor of your nose nasal cavity is the roof of your mouth also. So they share the common, common barrier, I can tell. Yeah, correct. So the nasal cavity will lead to the nasal passage, and the nasal passage will open up into a portion called as pharynx. Now, pharynx is not just any portion, just it is sitting there. Pharynx has a very important physiological role when it comes to deglutition and breathing, correct? No. So just take a look at this picture. So if you look at the picture, as I said, see, this is the hard palate, as I told. So this is your mouth. See, the hard palate and your nasal cavity, you can see here, this is your nostrils and this is your nasal cavity, isn't it? So they share the common roof and the floor, as I said. So that will lead to your nasopharynx. Okay, people. So this pharynx can be divided into three anatomical zones. What are the three anatomical zones? So first we have nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. Okay. So when we talk about these three important regions, so the nasopharynx is where it is connected to the nasal cavity, okay? And then when you look at the oropharynx and your nasopharynx are attached through the soft palate, all right? So here, and then it will lead to something called as laryngopharynx. Here what happens, whenever you try to swallow your food, that is the deglutition happens, because of the anterior, see your soft palate that is present in your mouth, it moves anteriorly upward. Whenever it moves anteriorly upward, now what happens is that will lead to the upward movement of your oropharynx as well as laryngopharynx, and also your tongue will move, it will try to touch your oropharynx. So that will lead to what, closing of your flap like structure called as cartilaginous flap like structure called as epiglottis over glottis. Okay, I will explain clearly about it. What you have to understand is anatomically the nasopharynx, okay, sorry, the anatomically, the nasal cavity opens into pharyngeal region, and the pharynx can be divided into three anatomical regions, and these are called as nasopharynx, oropharynx, and then you have laryngopharynx. Is it clear, students? Okay. Now, what happens once we enter through the pharynx? I told you this is a common passage for both food and water, right? Sorry, food and air. So since it is a common passage through food and air, now there has to be something that separates this food and air to their respective passages, right? Fine. So now, once the air enters into the pharynx, the next region it goes is through the larynx. Now, larynx, even though it is called as a voice box, the larynx is a cartilaginous structure. Okay, it is a cartilaginous structure. And now, out of three important portions of your pharynx, larynx is one of the important regions. Okay, now what happens whenever we try to push air in a particular volume and in a particular speed, that will create the passage of air moving from one point of your larynx to the other point. As the air moves through the pharynx, as the air passes through the larynx, that leads to the vibration of larynx, creates sound. So that is hello, students, can you hear me? Guys, can you hear me? Please affirm as soon as possible, because I kept on teaching. I didn't know that the Zoom has ended because of the network issue or something like that. I just want to know where we stopped. Where did the class end actually? Can somebody give me an affirmation that where did we stop? Till where did you hear the class? Because I didn't notice it. The class kept where kept happening. Okay. Yes, sir. So till where did you get the class? Did we talk about? Did you start hearing about uh, the anatomy of the respiratory system? Or should I start from this slide? Can you tell which slide I have to start from, please? Make it fast because we have 30 minutes. JNB PKD, I think you are replying. Can you please tell me, like, what is the last thing that you heard from this class? Okay, I'll just type if you cannot hear me. I don't know. Students, I need your reply as soon as possible, because I have no idea, till where it stopped or what slide it was playing. Okay. Yeah. Somebody thankfully replied. So let me see. I need your reply as soon as possible, because okay, Larix. I have no idea. Fine. All right. Okay, students, let's start with Larix. Sorted. Okay, then you heard me right. I thought actually the stream stopped. That was really funny. Okay, fine. So as I said, while the swallowing happens, or that is the deglutition happens, deglutition itself is quite a mechanical process. What happens is, as we deglute, okay, so the soft palate moves anteriorly upward, and then the tongue also moves upward, and then it trusts this epiglottis. Okay, tongue is extended almost till epiglottis. When it applies pressure over the epiglottis, which is a cartilaginous flap, will close this glottis. Understood? So as it closes the glottis, now it will open the food pipe for the passage of food and water. Okay. During the normal stage, whenever we are in the relaxed stage, whenever we are not swallowing, usually the tongue is at the lower part, and then the soft palate is relaxed. It is not anterior. So when the soft palate is relaxed, so obviously the whatever we are breathing, it directly goes into which region? It goes through the larynx. Okay, through the larynx, it is coming through a windpipe called as trachea. Understood? Fine. Now, what is trachea? Trachea, it extends. See, it extends from mid thoracic cavity It extends from mid-thoracic cavity. So now what happens when you see trachea? So basically it starts from see, this is your mid-thoracic cavity. From here, all the way, if it keeps on going down, so till where? Till your fifth rib, okay? Till the fifth rib, it will be as one pipe, understood? So here what happens, the trachea divides into two, okay, partitions, two partitions. So we'll talk about it. Now, if we talk about the trachea is made up of C-shaped ring, okay? Those are called as septal cartilages, okay? So these septal cartilages are, are C-shaped and they are present from, 12 to 18 rings are present. So these rings are interconnected by fibrocartilage, okay? So, okay, they are interconnected. So what happens is they are like a pump-like mechanism, okay? So whenever you breathe, okay, whenever you breathe, they will remain normal. But whenever you are doing the forced expiration, you can see that when you breathe out, you tend to squeeze your chest region. Whenever you tend to squeeze your chest region, so usually what happens, these rings, they come close to each other, removing the excessive air that is present in your trachea. All right. So the trachea is a pipe, or usually called as windpipe, which is made up of tracheal cartilage, and the tracheal cartilage are C-shaped septal cartilaginous rings, and they are connected by elastic fibers basically. So that will give them this elasticity. So now what did I tell? At the fifth thoracic vertebra, okay, so that is your you have your spinal cord, isn't it? So you have your spinal cord. So in your spinal cord we have so different regions, right? So we have thoracic, we have lumbar, we have sacral, we have cervical, correct? No. So cervical is near your spine, near your neck. Below your neck is called as thoracic. In thoracic, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So from the fifth bone of your spinal cord, that is in the thoracic region, your trachea starts, and all the way, at the fifth position of your spinal cord, now your trachea divides into right and left primary bronchi. So this right and left primary bronchi, along with the blood vessels, okay, along with the pulmonary arteries and pulmonary veins, it enters to the right and the left lungs. Understood? So as it makes an entry towards the right and the left lungs, it has to enter through one point, isn't it? So wherever it makes an entry into the lungs, that is called as hilum region. Okay, that is called as hilum region. At hilum region, okay, it makes an entry into the right and left lungs. As it makes an entry into the right and left lungs, now your primary bronchi, okay, will start bifurcating. Okay, it will branch and debranch, and it keeps on debranching. Okay, it becomes primary bronchi, secondary bronchi will become tertiary bronchi, and tertiary bronchi will terminate into alveolar colonies, okay, or clusters. So what happens as it keeps on bifurcating, okay, it will become smaller and smaller and smaller, and it will become root-like structure, like how you see the plant roots or the branches of the tree. It looks exactly like that. So this is called as pulmonary tree. Understood? So now what happens as your trachea is dividing into primary, secondary, and tertiary bronchi. Okay, so now as you keep on going, as it becomes more and more deeper, your primary bronchi and secondary bronchi are supported by cartilaginous rings. But as it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller pipes, okay, it gets debranched, and they are not supported by any of the cartilage. Did you understand? Fine. So now what did I tell? Usually the tertiary bronchi become thin terminal bronchioles. Terminal bronchioles, they hold this bunch. Okay, these are called as alveolar bunch. Did you understand? So this alveolar bunch will perform in the pulmonary respiration, where your exchange of gases. We'll talk about it. Understood? So fine. So you have your question here. The question is the structure which prevents the entry of food into the windpipe. Actually, we solved this question, isn't it? So let's skip this question. Okay. So let's get back here, people. So when you look at the tertiary bronchi or terminal bronchi, so the terminal bronchiole, which is a very, very thin pipe, you can see here. So as it terminates, it will result in a very irregular vascularized bag-like structures called as alveoli. So these alveoli are made up of very specialized cells. Okay, we can like type 1 alveolar cells, type 2 alveolar cells, and they're very, very important. And as I told, they're very, very thin walled. Okay, so now you remember when I told you that the blood vessels also make an entry into your lungs along with your primary bronchi. So as your bronchi divides into secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, and terminal bronchioles, now here what is happening? The same way along with your windpipe, the blood vessels also bifurcate along with them. They become thinner and thinner to become capillaries. Okay, they become so small. Okay, they'll become one cell thick blood vessels called as blood capillaries. Did you understand? Now, whatever this alveolar sac you have, this alveolar sac is completely, networked with your blood vessels. They have a huge network of, capillary network of blood vessels where the exchange of gases will take place. Understood? So we understood. What did we understand? When we talk about the anatomy of your respiratory system, it starts from your nose or nostrils. I'll open this slide. Okay, it starts from nose or nostrils. The nose opens into two nostrils, and the nostrils will lead to nasal cavity, and the nasal cavity is lined by nasal cilia, and the nasal cilia prevents any of the dust particles entering into your lungs. Next, the nasal cavity leads into the pharynx. The pharynx is a common passage for both food and water, as well as air. Now your pharynx can be divided into three anatomical zones: nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. So during soft palate and the pharynx, now it will lead to the closure of epiglottis over glottis. So once the glottis closes, now it allows the passage of food into the food pipe. Right? Whenever we are not swallowing anything, the epiglottis relaxes and the glottis opens into the food windpipe. So the windpipe opens through larynx, which is a voice box. The larynx leads to the windpipe, which is called as trachea. Trachea is a short pipe-like structure, okay, which starts from the larynx all the way till the fifth vertebral column. So here the larynx is lined by at least 12 C-shaped ring called as septal cartilage, okay, which prevents the collapse. See, whenever we breathe, right, whenever we respire hard, whenever we run, whenever we whenever we have high requirement of air, what will happen? There is a possibility that your windpipe can collapse from each other. So the septal cartilages or tracheal cartilages prevent from collapsing of your windpipe, as well as they help in forced expiration. Understood? Now your trachea will divide into left and right bronchi. So this right and left bronchi enter into the lungs at the hilum region. Left bronchi will enter into left lungs. Right bronchi will enter into the right lungs. Understood? So once this primary bronchi enters into the lungs, they start dividing into secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchioles, and then terminal bronchioles. Okay, that the terminal bronchioles, you have cluster of thin walled sac-like structures called as alveoli, and the alveoli help in exchange of gases. Understood? So here, how do they exchange gas? As your bronchi was dividing, I told you, along with your bronchi, the blood vessels also were entering into your lungs. So as it was dividing, the blood vessels were also dividing into smaller and smaller vessels. Ultimately, they formed very tight capillary network. Okay, very capillary, small, thin-walled capillary network along the walls of your alveoli. Clear? So as they form this network, here the exchange of gases will take place. Is it clear, students? Did you understand? Excuse me. Can I go to the next slide? No, this is where I have to do. Fine. So let us come to the anatomical position, location of the lungs, and how do they function? Okay. See, lungs are very, very sensitive structures that you should be knowing already. So since they are very important for many of the physiologists, especially, they are very, very important because it supplies oxygen to our brain, which helps in cognitive thinking. It supplies oxygen to our tissues, which helps in, sorry, which helps in promoting our tissues to gain energy, okay, and function, correct? No? So imagine that the lungs do not perform or stop functioning. So have you ever imagined what would happen if you drown? So you would definitely lose your consciousness and finally you end up dying, correct? No? So what happens if you go high up the mountains? You would get hypoxic and you will be having difficulty to breathe, correct? So even for a few minutes, we can't stop breathing. That is the importance of lungs. And lungs are like balloons, they're like sac-like structures, very sensitive, right? So because we are prone to so much of mechanical work, there is high possibility that our lungs could get damaged. So that is why our lungs are very well placed, right, within our thoracic cavity, right? So our lungs are placed within our thoracic cavity, which are protected by the ribs, correct? So now, is structure of the is made up of C. Hi students, you know what? This is very disturbing. Why? Because there is network. I don't know what's happening, but the Zoom is ending repeatedly. Okay. So what I will do is, anyway, it's time for us. I will end this session now. Okay. For now, I will end this session. Tomorrow, I will try to revise again and I'll try to teach you. Okay. Is it fine? It's already time. And moreover, I think we have to revise again because I don't like this disturbance. We'll do it again. Okay. So please let me know if you have any of the concerns in the chat box. I'll be here for another 2 minutes. And rest of you who have nothing to say, you can leave the class. Okay.